Welcome to the Founding Without Funding podcast, episode 2. My name is Kyle Hiersche, and today we are going to be talking a little bit about today. So, I know we're still in episode 2 here, so I know that we can all keep learning from each other. And today I want to talk about my first company and how I founded that without funding, obviously. And it has a few key points here that I want to tune into. I want to make sure that we get across. So it's a great story to tell because there's three different points that I want to touch on, and this story kind of touches on them all. So when I was 15, that's when I started my first company. And at first, I was doing, record label stuff, right? I was into the music industry. So I was around a lot of artists. And what I noticed was that we were all paying a lot of money for studio time. We were paying a lot of money to press up CDs at the time, right? This is back when CDs were the thing to listen to. And, that kind of stuff. So we were all spending a lot of money on these things in order to be able to do our business. So I started to say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and invest in my own stuff, and then I can sell some of those services to the artists and people that I know. So I built a recording studio, as well as bought a CD, duplicator back then, where it would take the CD and burn it, and then it would print on the CD, and then we would press it up and get it out there. And what happened was, as time went on, it started to be the music industry started to be a lot more about promotion. So I started printing up a lot of these CDs, and that became one of kind of my little side hustles. Right, I wouldn't say that this was a business yet, but it was a little side hustle that I was doing, pressing up CDs and stuff like that. Now, mixtapes at the time started to get really big. And that became probably the biggest promotional way for artists to get their music out there. And so, one night I was thinking with a friend of mine, how can we get our artists' music heard by more people here locally? And I said, you know what? Why don't we put them on a mixtape and put other artists that they like on it, and we'll put our artists in between those artists, and that way they can get promotion. And so what I ended up doing was printing up, again, I already had the CD printer and stuff. So I threw that together. I didn't need anybody's help to do it. And then I printed up a couple CDs, which again, I had already sitting around. So essentially no investment. And what I did was I started to go and try to sell them. And I went to, the different studios or places I knew artists and, stuff like that. And I would say, hey, you want to sell these, or you want to buy these, or can I set up a little, thing here to sell these? And what I found is that nobody was interested in actually buying the mixtape. But what happened was every artist I talked to was asking, well, how do I get on the next one? They didn't want to buy a copy of it, but they wanted to be, and they wanted their song to be on it. And so I said, well, if I put you on the next one, will you buy some copies? Will you buy 10, 20, 40, 50, 100 copies if I put you on the next one? And of course, they're all like, oh, yeah, 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 I would do that. Right. So I said, there might be something to this then. Nobody wants to just buy it directly, but if they're on it, then they would buy some. And so I took that idea, and, I started reaching out to the people who were essentially that I knew, the different artists and stuff, and I tried to line them up for it. But of course, everybody's just kind of, oh, I don't have the money right now, or, let me know when it's about ready to come out, and then I'll pitch in, or whatever the case is, right? So just kind of slow playing it. And essentially, I said, okay, what I need to do is reach out to other people, and I need to put a little bit of more of a name behind this, and then I could sell it to people who don't even know me, right? So I said, if I can present this in a more professional way, a more legitimate way than just being me trying to sell it to people I know, if I can package this up in a more legitimate way, I could sell it to random people who don't know me. And of course, the internet was a big thing. It was the days of MySpace, is when this was going on. And so what I did was I MySpace messaged a bunch of big DJs, and I told them, hey, this is my, mixtape. and I would like you to host the next one. How much would it cost? And so I just cold messaged a bunch of DJs and asked them for their price to host the mixtape. One of the DJs got back to me. Well, actually, a bunch of them got back to me, but one of the DJs got back to me and gave me a price. They were a pretty prominent DJ. And so I figured that with that price and their name, I could make this work. So what I did was I took the name of my mixtape that I already had, which was Coast to Coast Mixtapes, and I put that DJ, I did hosted by that DJ, and I made a cover for it. And then what I did was I started cold messaging a bunch of artists on MySpace and telling them about this mixtape that I'm putting together, hosted by this DJ. There's going to be these artists on it. And if you buy 100 copies of the mixtape, then I will put you on it. And essentially, I sent that out to a bunch of people, just kept messaging people for a couple of days. And then a couple people said that they were interested. So I sent a PayPal link out to a couple of people, and boom, one person paid. And it was a miracle. And it literally changed my life. Now, in the book, Founding Without Funding, you'll see that I talk a lot about the miracle of your first sale. And I love it. It's one of the greatest feelings ever. It really is a miracle when the market responds to a product or service that you're offering and purchases it and lets you know that it's a legitimate idea, that it's something that works in the market. And so, it was absolutely exciting. And what I did was I was able to take that money and then pay the DJ to actually host it. So I had essentially sold it before I bought it, right? And that's kind of the lesson of the very first, company that I started, which essentially I sold before I bought it. I found out the price that the DJ was going to charge. And then I reached out to a bunch of people and said, this is the mixtape I'm putting together. It's going to be hosted by this person, this, and that. And I got somebody to pay for it. And then I took that money and I used that to pay the DJ. So I essentially had no cost in actually starting this up. Now, here's a little side story here, which has another great lesson in it of, investing in yourself and not missing out. That obviously the DJ was paid for with the first sale that I got. But what I still needed was the covers for the mixtape. And these are essentially flyers that you had to print up, right? So it's $170 to print 5,000 flyers. I already had the CDs to actually press up because I was already doing that on the side. I already had the cases to put the CDs in. We just needed the flyers or the inserts to put in them. So we needed the $170. Now, the gentleman that I was talking to about this idea, we were going to do this together. We kind of came up with the concept together one night. But of course, I kind of took it and did all this stuff. I'm more of the computer and salesperson and stuff. So I had pretty much done everything up to this point. And I told him, hey, we're going to need to pay for these flyers to be pressed up in order to do this. So I need you to come give me $85. If we're going to go half on this and be in this together, I need you to pay $85 so that I can take the other 85 and I'll go get the flyers printed up. Right. And he essentially just kind of stalled and actually never ended up doing it. I had the papers drawn up already and everything to put in the company with the state, with us owning 50-50, and all that kind of good stuff. And he never invested the $85. Now, fast forward, that company's done almost $25 million in lifetime sales. We've done up to $250,000 in 1 month of revenue. And this gentleman missed out on owning 50% of that because he didn't invest $85, right? So even though this, podcast, my book, the course is about founding without funding, what we're talking about is funding from outside investors. You're going to have to put your money where your mouth is at some point. And this gentleman didn't want to do that. So for $85, he lost out on a lot. Now, of course, a lot had to happen after that. We had to build that company up. Then we moved to Miami and and that company changed into an event company. So who's to know what would have happened with that gentleman or how much of a part of it he would have been or where we would have gone. And I'm sure he's happy how he is, right? Great guy. He has a great family. I'm sure has no regrets in his life. But the key here is that $85 stops somebody from owning 50% of a multi-million dollar business. And so you have to be willing to invest. And I say invest in yourself because this was this gentleman's idea as well, right? It wasn't he needed to believe in me to invest. It was our idea that we had came up with that we were going to do together. And here's one of those key lessons is that it's not about the idea. It's about the execution and it's about investing in yourself to make that idea happen. Key investing in yourself. So, founding without funding, we don't need an investor to start. We don't need funding to start from an outside source, but we're going to need to put some of our money where our mouth is, right? And so that's a great kind of example of not wanting to put that money in order to do what needs to be done at the beginning. And that ended up costing somebody 50% of a multi-million dollar company, which absolutely changed my life. And so, that's definitely a lesson. But the big lesson from the story of starting my first company was that really I sold it before I bought it. And I was able to do that, especially using what was a newer tool, which was MySpace at the time. And I'll just tell you kind of a funny story. There was a time when our office was in a little tiny basement of a tax office, and there was no windows. And we had, I think, 12, maybe 12 computers set up. And because MySpace at the time would make you essentially, put in a CAPTCHA every 5 messages you sent or whatever, right? They'd make you put in the CAPTCHA. So we had like 12 computers lined up, and we had an employee that's sole job was to sit there and copy and paste and send out these messages. And then, well, actually, we had a program that would do that. And then, so somebody just needed to type in the CAPTCHA. And so we had a full-time employee that just sat there and went from computer to computer typing in the CAPTCHA. And by the time they got done with 12, the first one was ready to type in again. And that was their full-time job because that's the method that we had at the time. Now, fast forward to now, I talked yesterday in yesterday's episode about how this is the greatest time ever to start a business. This is much easier to use meta advertising tools to be able to start and grow a business than it was back then. We were kind of hacking together and manually doing some stuff on MySpace, which was not really meant for this. But now you have the most powerful advertising platform and tool in the world available to you, not through some agency, not through some big company that you have to hire. It's available to you directly for free, and you can spend as little as $1 a day. And that's what we talked about yesterday. So it's a way better time than when we had done this. So to take this concept and do it today would have been much easier, but it just lets you know how easy you could make this happen, seeing that, I made it happen back then with what was available at the time, which was manually sending MySpace messages and hiring a person to sit there and type in CAPTCHAs all day on 12 different computers that were running the MySpace automated message sender. So great example there. You can sell before you buy. Again, I founded, 10 other businesses. They're not all done the same, but that was my first real business. That was how I got started. And of course, that business changed my life, was able to take me around the world. I've been to almost every US city. I've been to 7 different countries, even all the way to Australia, all from that business. And so I'm very blessed. And it was all started without any money. I had some material sitting around from what I was already doing. But other than that, I sold it before I actually bought it. And that started the momentum of everything that had happened after that. And, from there, obviously, we were doing our thing and we were getting bigger and growing and investing into more, we didn't have ads at that time. So at the time it was investing into more computers, more employees to type in numbers into those computers, or CAPTCHAs, excuse me. So of course, just like nowadays, we were doing the same thing back then where we were reinvesting and reinvesting. Now, at the time, there started to be a lot of magazines coming out, a lot of music magazines. So around this time was when there started being companies that could print magazines up for you if you had your own magazine and stuff. So it started to become a lot more available. You started seeing magazines pop up that are more like promotional magazines. And I said, you know what, this is kind of what we're doing, right? So maybe we should do a magazine. Now, I had never written a magazine, had no knowledge of a magazine, but I said, you know what, let's go ahead and do this and let's try to get somebody big to be on our first magazine cover. One great thing we did have was an amazing graphic designer. And so I said, if we can get a major artist or somebody big on our first front cover, then I could go sell that to people wanting promotion, whether it's ads or wanting to be in the magazine. And I knew that we'd have a great looking cover if I could just get the commitment from the person to be on the cover. My graphic designer could make an amazing cover. I could take just that, just the idea in the piece of artwork, and I could go sell that before I even buy it. So what I did was went back to MySpace, started cold messaging a ton of different people, from artists to DJs to producers, and essentially, not many responses back, but I did get a response from DJ Khaled. And it was actually his manager, Kiko. Shout out to Kiko. I didn't know him at the time, right? I know him now because I live here in Miami, but he didn't know who I was at the time. So shout out to Kiko for responding with his number. And then I was able to talk to him. And at the time, Khaled was a big DJ in our world, right, in the music world, but he wasn't the celebrity that he is now. But he was really on his way to exploding. But it was more than enough for me to go sell this to music industry people because they absolutely know who he was, right? So, um, you know, I was able to talk to him, and he said, you know what, if you shoot us this much, then Khaled will actually host your next mixtape, because I had asked him about that as well, and he'll do the front cover of the magazine and do the interview and the photo for you and everything. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll get back to you with the money. And so what I did was, of course, I then had my designer make a magazine cover with this, with that person on it, with Khaled on it. And the magazine cover looked amazing because, again, we had a great graphic designer. And then I was able to take that magazine cover and go to the people I already knew or previous clients and local businesses. And I was able to sell slots in that magazine, whether it was ad space or artists wanting to be highlighted in it. And so I was able to actually go sell those and to get the money to pay Kiko so that we could have Khaled do this. And that magazine and that mixtape was really the key changing point for that business. Now, it had a lot to do with luck, a lot to do with timing, because of how Khaled was just starting to really explode. So by the time I actually got the mixtape and the magazine out, he was probably twice as famous as he was when I first talked to him. And so, it was good timing as well. So a lot of businesses luck, no matter how you look at it. And what happened really was that the timing came together, and the mixtape came together, our biggest mixtape we had ever done to date. The magazine came together, great first issue. I just saw a copy the other day when I went back to Portland. Great looking cover of the magazine. You can still probably find out there if you Googled it. And that really allowed us to go to the next level. And so again, it was a case of where I sold it before I bought it. I got the price, and then I went and I put it together, essentially, AKA just made the cover of what it's going to look like to make it real to people, right? It was then tangible when I went and took it to other people, and they had known that we had already done work with people like that, right? So it wasn't coming out of nowhere or something that we had built upon. And so essentially, we were able to take that, have people's trust enough to invest in the product before I actually bought it. I was able to take that money that I had already sold and then actually pay to get the mixtape and the magazine done. And so it's just again a great story of sell before you buy. It's something that actually happened, two different points in that first company which completely changed my life, because the first one was my first miracle, my first true miracle of somebody purchasing that first mixtape slot with those copies, right? When I had got the DJ, got the quote from him, and then I had, gone out there, reached out to the marketplace, right? So The reason why I say that that was my first miracle is because that was from the marketplace. So in Founding Without Funding, I talk a lot about the marketplace responding to your product or service and how much of a miracle that is. Keep in mind when I'm talking about that, I'm not talking about your friends, your family, your people you know personally necessarily, right? Because remember, I'd already been selling studio time, I'd already been selling CD duplication services. So this wasn't the first time I sold something, but those were all to people who I knew, right? This was me putting out a new idea, a new concept, a new product and service into the marketplace, meaning people that I do not know, right? People that I was just messaging on MySpace, cold messaging on MySpace. So it's important to remember that a lot of people may have a business where they know people in person and they can make sales in person and stuff. So it's not necessarily the first sale you ever make is a miracle. It's your first sale to the marketplace, meaning someone who does not know you, right? Somebody who just sees your offering, however it comes across to them in whatever way, recommendation, marketing, advertisement, and then they respond and purchase it. So that's why I say that first mixtape was really my first miracle, because it was the first time I put something out into the marketplace to people who didn't know me at all. And they said, you know what? That's a great offering. I'm going to pay for that. And just like we talked about yesterday, the market votes with dollars, everything else is commentary. And that was a great example of it. The market had voted with their dollars and it changed my life. I said, hey, this works. Now all we need to do is make it work more. And so it's funny, I talk about back then in the MySpace days, the way we scaled that up was that we had to buy 12 different computers and line them up all in a room and have a program that automatically messages people on MySpace, and then MySpace makes you type in a captcha every one. So we had a full-time person there just going computer to computer typing in these captchas. That was how we scaled it, because we said, you know what, it worked. When we MySpace message people, they are accepting this offer, they're paying for it. So how do we do that more and more and more? So that was the way to scale up then. And again, the beautiful part about nowadays is you don't need to do that, right? You don't need to do any of that. You just need to put more fuel on your fire by putting more advertising dollars behind you. And maybe you make a lot of your business from social media, not necessarily advertising, but maybe content. And again, the way to scale that up would be to make more and more content, right? It's a pretty simple concept nowadays, which is what's so great. So, much easier now to scale the businesses that I come up with than it was back then. And I can't, that was when I was first starting out. I can't imagine how hard it was for people before me with no internet. But I am, that first generation that came up in the internet age. And when I was about the age where I started to actually make money, MySpace was the thing. And so that's what we were using. And then we grew along with that as new social media platforms started to come out and new avenues to promote started to come out. Of course, we pursued those and we just kept growing and growing. One of the things that somebody had told me a long time ago that really stuck with me, it was actually a client of that company. They said, every time I go onto a new platform, I see you guys. When I was on MySpace, you guys were all over MySpace. Now I'm on Twitter, you guys are all over Twitter. And that really stuck with me because that client, he kept purchasing things over and over. And as I talked to him more, because again, in the Founding Without Funding book, one of the things we talk about, talk to your clients, get feedback from them. And this was a repeat client who kept purchasing things from us, kept purchasing our product and services. And so I spoke to him a lot. And that was one of the things that stuck out to me was he was like, you know what, everywhere I go, you guys are everywhere. Every social platform I go to. And he was like, you're in my inbox because you guys do all kinds of email blasts and stuff like that. And when I had spoken to him more, he said, you know what, that's one of the reasons why I always work with you is because you're always there and you're always seem to be available. Now, he meant two things by that. One is that we're always there, meaning the presence. Wherever you go, we were there. Wherever platform he was on, we were on that platform. I'm sure he's probably still stalked by our Facebook and Instagram ads, even to this day. But it was a feeling of being comfortable in doing business with us because we were there. We weren't fly by night. It was, we were out there in front of people's faces and on every platform that he was on. Mind you, these platforms were new at the time. This was when Twitter was first coming out, and Facebook, and way before Instagram. So these things were brand new, and every time they went on these platforms, they would see us. So he kind of meant two things by that, and they both stuck with me. Was one, that you know when he feels more comfortable doing business with us because he sees us everywhere, but for two, that he could speak to us, that he could call the office. Now, in the music promotion business, and what eventually became events, there's not very many professional companies. We were always about being professional. We had a office phone. We had a secretary that always answered the office phone, took messages, would talk to people, help them out. And this is all in a tiny little dark basement of a tax office. We also had CD duplicators that would press up 1,000 CDs at a time, and print on them and stuff. And so we had people typing in captchas and putting together CDs and all this stuff, like a factory, but in a tiny little basement of a tax office. And to go back to his point that we were always there, he could always call if something happened, if he was confused, and if something went wrong. Especially, he was able to call, and our secretary would answer the phone. He could even get through to the CEO, which was me at the time, and he could get any issue solved. Now, what's funny about this is that he and a lot of our other best clients were actually people who had an issue at one point, either in the beginning or, later as they kept buying more services. And I'll tell you what, if you handle your problems correctly, and if you're there for your clients and you're available and you are willing to make things right, even if it costs you some money out of your pocket or some time or some free product or service, they will be customers for life. Those are your best customers. Some of your best customers will have a big issue with their first order. The best companies in the world drop the ball all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean you have a bad company because you drop the ball on one client or one product or service that you were trying to provide someone. What really makes a difference is, what do you do after that? And so this gentleman loved us because when he had a big problem, he was able to call the office, get an answer. He got an apology for what was messed up on our part. He then got a free product or service to make up for it. And then he was so comfortable with us moving forward because here we are, we're out on social media. He sees us everywhere. He's like, yep, that's the company that I work with. I like to buy their services. I'm comfortable because I'm seeing them everywhere. I'm comfortable because I can, call up their office, and I'm very comfortable buying their product or service because I know even when something went wrong, I was able to contact them immediately and they fixed the problem. And he's almost hoping that we mess up again because he was able to get much more, right? Because he got some free product and stuff to make up for it. So, that was one thing that stuck with me from that time is that client. And that's always stuck with me through all of our businesses. So a few lessons here for today. You can you can sell it before you buy it, like I did with the mixtapes. You can essentially, I essentially did the same thing with the magazine with DJ Khaled and all that. So you can sell it before you buy it. And then also, the other lesson from today, don't miss out on millions by not investing $85, right? Somebody, passed on owning 50% of a business that does millions per year. And it was just because he didn't want to put in the $85 to fund half of the covers for that first project. And so, he was living life, and that's okay. And again, I said, shout out to him. I know he probably has no regrets. He's got a great family and doing great things in his life. But you definitely, if you're looking to be in business for yourself, you don't want to miss that opportunity. You don't want to miss owning 50% of a company that goes on to do multi-millions per year, right? So always invest in yourself, invest in your company. Founding without funding does not mean not investing money. It means investing your own money. And sometimes it means investing customers' money if you can sell it before you buy it, which is what I did in this scenario with my first company. So that is our lesson here for today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow to talk about some founding without funding basics and start to go through some of the chapters of the book to give you an idea of what is in there. You can take the course and purchase the book at foundingwithoutfunding.com.